Wide receiver. Everybody wants to talk about wide receivers, so why doesn't anyone want to talk about Van Jefferson? Good morning to you. Good Tuesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. If you're not familiar with Jefferson, and there's a really good chance you're not, because I don't see, hear, or read this individual's name anywhere, and that's not just because he was really tough to find after practices in these summer workouts. He's got a resume that probably outdoes the rest of the resumes on the roster, at least in terms of longevity or quantity. He's been in 61 NFL games. He made 35 starts, 113 catches, 1,600 on the nose yards, 10 touchdowns. And he's not that old. He's going to be turning 28 later this year. So what's his major malfunction? Why does nobody, including myself, by the way, I'm not exempting anything here. I don't even think about the guy. And I probably should, at least a little. Because if you're looking at that specific depth chart, regardless of where it is that they line up on the offense, meaning right or left or slot or outside or whatever, it probably goes George Pickens and I don't know, Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin. Again, depends on how you're structuring them, but it might be Jefferson as far as outside guys. Where I stand on this, and it's ambiguous, but you always hear me talking about don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Well, in this case, the they are a couple other teams, not the Steelers, because Jefferson opened up last season with the Rams, and Puka Nacua did too. Guess who suffered for Nacua showing up there? Right, exactly. They actually didn't need him at all. They sent him to the Falcons. You know, that team where Arthur Smith was the head coach. Smith ends up getting him 12 catches in 12 games. And yet, somehow, that season ends. Smith becomes the coordinator in Pittsburgh. Smith had to have been involved in any recommendation, if not being front and center in such a recommendation, to bring Jefferson here the way he's been with other players, notably Cordero Patterson. But we're only months removed from not just one team not wanting his contributions, but from two teams not wanting them. And it's not like there's some slew of wide receivers in Atlanta to block you. So what does this mean? I mean, they're all going to tell you, and they did, by the way, that it means nothing. We, the Steelers, are going to look at him through our own prism. And then, more significantly, Jefferson showed well, at least as well as one can, in OTAs and minicamp. So, barring some major Omar Khan move that it feels like all of us are still waiting for, Jefferson's going to get his reps in Latrobe. He's going to get his opportunity to be part of a starting offense. I happen to believe he's not going to be blocked here. Again, barring that big move. But, there's also a part of me that doesn't foresee anyone at that specific position getting a ton of action regardless. If you go back to Smith's offense in Atlanta, the catching totals were along the lines of two tight ends way at the top, a third guy who was a wide receiver, like somewhere at a level below that, but still miles above everybody else. I can't know right now to what degree that can be adjusted. I can't know right now what kind of formations he's going to put onto the field. What I can and do know is that Pat Freiermuth's the happiest guy on the planet right now, and that there's cause for that, because he has been told and he has been deployed as such that he's going to be the guy getting a ton of targets. He's going to be the guy that the Steelers feed a lot. And if he's used in that role, whether it's over the middle or actually in these summer sessions, he was, to his credit, effective all over. I saw Freiermuth running routes that I hadn't seen since his Penn State film. And if that's the case, and you keep George Pickens as the deep threat, as the splash guy, and then you have somebody else in the slot, whether it's Wilson or Austin, it's entirely plausible that the other wide receiver position won't even exist, which then begs the question, is Jefferson a sufficient replacement for Pickens if Pickens gets hurt? And now we're starting to go off the deep end here with this subject. This is why I don't bring him up. Okay, it's not out of disrespect, and it's not because he was incredibly hard to find to interview this summer. It's because I'm not buying this, okay? When we come back, J1Q.
This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar.
Today's J1Q comes from James, but it's far from the only one that was sent this way on the subject from yesterday of whether or not Nick Herbig is already being buried or not being buried or was buried last year. Whichever stance anyone would happen to take on that, there were strong feelings expressed. Most of those basically saying, just figure it out, get him on the field more. And then from there, the expected comparison points between Herbig and the 2023 version of Alex Highsmith, with people coming in on both sides of that too. Some people really liked what they saw of Highsmith and felt that he was underappreciated despite having only 7 sacks. James says, if the Steelers didn't see or care about Mason Rudolph's abilities, blind eye syndrome, could it be the same with Herbig? And a funny thing is, James wasn't the only one to bring this up. Like, I was not expecting Rudolph to show up in this debate in any form, but he did several times. And no. Every time I've mentioned the Steelers' obviously poor evaluations of Rudolph, I've referenced the quarterback position specifically. What I have been told by people on the inside is that they whiffed on the quarterback because they weren't used to having to analyze quarterbacks. Specifically, Mike Tomlin didn't have to do that for the better part of 2 decades. Now, Tomlin's had his share of whiffs at edge rusher. Jason Worlds was put on to the wrong side. Acknowledged to everybody that he was on a side that wasn't all that comfortable for him, got absolutely nothing done. Then they moved him to the other side, and woohoo, there he went. Something similar, though not anywhere near as pronounced, happened with Bud Dupree. And let's not even bother to rewind the clock to Jarvis Jones, who never should have lined up opposite an NFL tackle. Not at his stature. Great dude, one of my favorites to come along in that locker room, but my goodness, no. It didn't take a degree in footballology to see that he was undersized for his position at this level. And at the same time, I'd like to think that the organization and the head coaches involved in this that identified T.J. Watt when he'd spent most of his college career on the other side of the ball, they probably know what they're doing. I could say the same for Highsmith. Performing as he did at a small college program in Charlotte, full credit. So no, I don't think it's that they don't see what Herbig's doing. He's kind of hard to miss. He gets a handful of snaps a game and he's coming up with a forced fumble or a sack or both. But I do know for a fact that they believe deeply in Highsmith. They value things that Highsmith does that they feel, and maybe correctly, that the rest of us don't appreciate as much as they do. Let's remember that he was identified very quickly and very emphatically as an extension candidate after that 14-sack season, but not because of that, and they seldom even brought that up. It was about everything else that he offered, not least of which is his durability, the snaps that he can handle, how he holds up in those snaps. And until you see Herbig out there for 17 games and 65, 70 snaps a game, you're not going to have a great answer, and neither will I, for this comparison. But I'm with you, man. I'd love to find out. I'd love to find a way to get him out of the field. I just can't think of anything. I couldn't think of anything yesterday. I can't think of anything today. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Nick Herbig. We're going to do another one of these tomorrow.